You're good. I'm good. We are here. Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Let's get started. Okay. So, Ali, hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Keith. Yes, good to be here.
Lovely, lovely, Ali. So, me and you have been talking now for some time, and we met on the wonderful world of LinkedIn. We started to soon work out and realize that we had so much in common in terms of the people that we talk to and trying to maybe assist and impart knowledge, and actually so many kind of crossover and layers. Um, and that's kind of what brought us here today. What do you just give us kind of the overview, Ali, of kind of not only who you are, introduce yourself, like, what is it you're doing, and tell us the people that you try to help and work with, Ali.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. I'm Alli Noel, accredited menopause coach. It's a bit of a journey as to how I got here. Basically, I had cancer treatment 2018 and fell off the proverbial cliff with symptoms. It turned out it was not just menopause, but it was ADHD symptoms, because that's something that's very common. As I was recovering from this, I appreciated that the information that was available was really rather poor. I've got a science background, so I was wanting evidence. And during this time, I decided I would train as a menopause coach and have a bit of a career change. I had resigned this job that I loved. I was senior operations manager, and it was a good time to have a change. So if I said that I tried to be the support that I wish I'd had years ago, I think that's in a nutshell. So I like to focus on high achievers, those that are and helping them reach their goals while they're managing symptoms, to try and just have this positive outlook so that they can embrace this new chapter in their life. I like to always be that optimistic. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that. I love that comment as well. But being the person, I often say I'm the coach that I needed, 4 or 5 years ago. And I know what that means in terms of, often there's gaps, isn't there, maybe in the system or in our own learning, our own understanding. I love that. Okay, I want to really dive in now, Ali, to a few of the kind of the parts where we have some kind of commonalities, and I think I also find it fascinating learning and understanding the work that you do, and I've got some questions for you, and I've already learned so much from chatting to you, and I'm sure there's some questions that you can throw my way that might be able to help. In terms of understanding about kind of what I do, and for the people that you work with as well.
Absolutely.
Does that sound like a plan?
Oh, it does.
Brilliant. Well, if I begin then, and just coming at it from kind of my perspective, because I mostly work with men, and often these are high achieving, professional men, often company owners, business leaders, and they come to me when they have usually had a bit of they're fed up, essentially feeling fed up, and they essentially, alcohol has been identified by them to be not working out for them. Then just the trade-off has just become too much, where maybe when they were going through their formative years or into their 20s or early 30s, and they were okay with it, they could do the trade-off, they could take the hit essentially with alcohol, and knowing that they're going to maybe have the consequences, but it just gets to a point in their life where it's just not, the trade-off doesn't work out anymore, and they want to take a break. So that's kind of the type of person that I work with, and I usually support them on a 30, 60 or a 90-day break from alcohol. There's so much that gets wrapped up into that. So much of it comes into their relationships, and I think this is where a lot of our kind of overlap and commonality came in when we were chatting, Ali.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it was very interesting because we wouldn't necessarily have put ourselves together, but actually we have that common area, which is we're trying to help people. It's not quite refine themselves, but it's fulfilling potential, isn't it? And it's actually achieving those goals that they've set, because too often you can hit this sort of time of midlife, for want of a better phrase, and it's that questioning, where do you want to be in life, and and just looking at those obstacles that are preventing you get there.
Yeah, I love that. Let's go straight into that, because so much of the work that I do with the guys that I work with, once they've addressed alcohol and they've kind of they're dealing with it, they're a few weeks in, they might be a month, they might be 2 months, and they've not drank. Everything seems to be elevating in their life. But one of the biggest shifts they notice is in their relationships. Often that's the relationship with their spouse, with their partner, their closest people in their lives. And often that's been put on the back burner, because if they've been drinking, if they've been kind of putting themselves first, essentially leading potentially a selfish life, then that has an impact, and that can lead to so many different consequences. It can lead to people being unfaithful. It can lead to an unfulfilled marriage. It can lead to them kind of feeling like they are separating. And this is where a lot of our stuff came through. So just tell us, Ali, from your work, like with women, we're in relationships with couples, what kind of changes and responses have you seen when they start to maybe drift, or maybe they perceive it to be happening? And in particular, I know a lot of this happens around when menopause is happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what might be easiest, Keith, if I explain sort of like what can happen during menopause. And of course, men go through andropause, which is not quite as dramatic, but it still has an impact on men. So with women, when they're going through the normal menstrual cycle, that can start to change. And the hormones that are involved, because as you probably know, you have menstruation and then you have ovulation, that's the egg being produced. If it's not fertilized, it doesn't embed, then it gets shed, so you have the cycle again. So there's a whole combination of hormones involved in that, and it's really quite complex. And as a lot of women find that they go through cyclical, maybe mood changes, and there can be quite a lot of symptoms that they can actually start having. They will maybe get a little bit of brain fog that comes with during pregnancy. There's quite a few different things can happen, and it's becoming aware of their bodies. Now, when they start to go into perimenopause, because there's all these combinations of hormones, when you look at graphs and things, they'll tell you everything is nice and smooth. You get a nice sort of roll. It's not like that in reality. It often is very chaotic. So you have everything going all over. So then what happens is, and what I should actually add in as well, they reckon that 85% of women are not prepared for menopause. We don't have the same communities that we had. There's a whole load of reasons, but and we're living longer. The average age has not changed, but we're living longer, so it's having more of an impact. You add into that all these hormone fluctuations that are all over the place. What happens with a woman is she just notices there's a lot of changes, and she stops recognizing herself. If she's aware of what's happening, then she's maybe starting to grieve those reproductive years ending for whatever reason. There can be a lot of increase in stress and anxiety at that time. Again, this is all part of the fluctuation. Basically, it can be a very challenging, a very frightening time. And if you've got somebody that doesn't actually know what's happening, even if they've had the most fantastically communicative relationship, they may sort of just change. And I can imagine, I have lots of situations where, this common comment is they're not recognizing themselves, but also the partners don't recognize them in the same way. Okay, so everything changes, and it comes at a time often when kids are leaving home. So if you've got a breakdown in communication, or the woman is on survival mode, as I call it, she's trying to juggle everything. She's trying to retain that superwoman status, which a lot of women have been missold. I mean, that could be a whole different area to go into. And it can be just a very, very tough time in them. So it does take a lot of understanding as to what's going on, which is why, something like this is great, because it's actually allowing, the other side to be seen, which might not be able to be seen.
Yeah, I love that, because so often this is happening there is no time when menopause kicks in. Like I'm sure you're about to tell me it can happen. Am I right in saying it could happen in a woman in her 30s and up into her 50s? Would that be
Yeah,
a fair statement?
yeah, the average age has stayed about 51, and that's been since census records began. However, there's a lot of conditions that can actually cause early menopause or premature menopause. So you have a whole load of conditions like premature ovarian insufficiency is one, there's endometriosis, there's a whole load of conditions that can happen that cause that. And then you have surgery, you know, cancer. I mean, I was forced into menopause through cancer treatment, and that happened overnight. It was, you know, a quick propulsion. So there's lots of different reasons. And I think for those women, considering that 85% are not prepared, if you're a much younger woman, you're not at all prepared.
No, this is huge, and this is why I'm so glad we're able to have this conversation, because if I'm coming at it from my perspective, I'm a man, and a lot of my audience and the guys I work with are men. I don't think we know about this, Alli, and often one of the biggest things I talk about in being successful, and I don't mean that in a business or in a monetary or a financial sense. I mean having all of these kind of pillars elevated, and one of those biggest things is having a successful relationship, and whoever that is, with your wife, your partner. And if we don't know what's going on in her life, and if we're not having that kind of channel of communication, that open discourse, I think that is really maybe setting ourselves up to fail. So I want to ask you a few of the questions that maybe we might be thinking. So if I am in a relationship and my wife or my partner is maybe going through this menopause, and I either know this or I suspect it, what kind of advice do you think, as a man, what could I do that might be able to even help my partner go through this phase?
I think if somebody starts to notice a difference in their partner, it's actually being that little bit observant, because it will become cyclical, but it will be different. And it's actually just asking, you know, how they're feeling, because I could imagine that with a lot of situations, the woman could maybe become very sharp. She might become very critical. You know, there's a lot of behavior patterns that might just seem that little bit different. They're not the person they quite were, or certain traits maybe become, you know, happen more regularly. And so I think just having that conversation, but actually giving time. I think one of the things that's going to come out of today, I think, will be sort of appreciating the time that is needed. You know, anything worth working on needs investment, doesn't it? You know, and I think time is critical. So I think, you know, it's having that open, honest conversation, even to get the woman to the stage of realizing, oh, something's not quite right, I need to seek some help, or even talking about things to be able to have that chance of saying, do you know, I look in the mirror and I just don't know who I am anymore. I don't like what's changing in my body. I'm having all these different symptoms that I just don't know what to do. I'm not able to function at work anymore. I mean, that happened myself. I was finding I'd been very competent, very capable, and then all of a sudden was feeling very overwhelmed. Imposter syndrome hit big style. You know, who do I think I am? Without realizing, well, hang on, I have done this role very well. What's going on that I'm not managing it quite as well at the moment? I think it's just having that, being curious about the person rather than having that reaction. I think with couples, what can happen is one flares up and the other responds, and before you know it, you've got World War II. Whereas, you know,
and what do people do when they're stressed or when they feel under pressure? We go for that stress reliever, don't we?
Well, that's what I wanted to, you know, begin to ask you. I mean, it's really quite concerned me how in society at the moment we have that real driver towards, you know, I mean, for women, there's open advertising, wine o'clock, gin o'clock, you know, put the kids to bed, get your wine out, you know. it's all right. It's only a couple of glasses. You know, we're in this, I think, is it called grey area drinking, you know, where, you know, everything's acceptable, and it's really quite a worry. So I'd love to know, you know, you've talked about 4 pillars that you use. You know, it'd be really good if you could sort of explain more about that.
Yeah.
And just how it improves sort of lives and relationships.
And you know, as much as my audience is often men, this is not a gender specific thing. It's just because of who I've chosen to work with. So this works for every single person. So when I start you know, an engagement with a new client, after I've kind of I get to understand where they're at and what's happening in their lives at the moment. But for everyone, we always look at 4 pillars, and these are 4 pillars that I've identified over time. That if we can, if we're kind of if we're making inroads and we're doing well in these 4 pillars, then generally 90% of the things will be going well. So what I look at our health, and that's our physical and our mental health, our relationships being really successful and positive. I look at our own personal development. So that's, you know, how we upskill ourselves. Often that's around reading, around podcasts, around improving our wider understanding of the world. And then I wrote about, I said health, relationships, personal development, and then it's our business and professional life. So often the people I'm working with, they are either business owners or they are, you know, senior professionals, executives, C-suite, and it's they really want to be, you know, getting that balance right, but also be, you know, elevating and becoming successful and moving that dial on forwards. So we look at those 4 different areas, and that's a really a nice way for anyone to look at it, because often people find themselves, okay, I'm doing really well professionally, but it's come at a cost. You know, my health has taken a back seat maybe in the last 5 years, last 10 years, and they want to redo that balance. So I help try and rebalance that. But none of this is possible, Ali, without removing the alcohol, because it's just such a it's like trying to swim and you're just being weighed down with a lead weight, and the alcohol has to be pushed, albeit, you know, for an initial period of 60 or 90 days. But that just creates the space then, Ali, to get after the good eating, the good sleeping, the good training, the positive mindset, the gratitude, all of that stuff. So that's kind of where I start with. Then I think we go to like what I would call next level stuff, and this is the real stuff. I think that the real fabric that you know, where the big wins are, the real life-changing stuff. And this is around the relationships and elevating maybe your marriage and actually really having a look at it. A lot of the time I speak with men, we come to the conclusion that we were bringing the drama, so much of it, and it's only when we have these honest and open, frank conversations as men, often we are bringing the drama into that relationship. It can be due to our choices, our behaviors, our kind of just maybe not being comfortable with the ordinary, not being comfortable with the mundane, not being comfortable with home life. And actually, the beauty is there for you, but it's just when your headspace is not in that. And this is often when the relationships start to split and they go sideways. And often that is where you talked about, when, you know, there's a lot going on. And I love how when the guys start to address their own behaviors and their own self, they actually notice themselves coming back together. And really, it's really like they fall in love for the second time, maybe, if that's an expression. You can, you know, they know they love this person, or they really like this person, because that's why they're together in the first place. But they find themselves at a kind of a crossroads as to where they want to go. So I like it when the guy sorts his own house in order, then they can come back and be like, I'm ready, I'm open, and I actually really care about you.
I mean, that's just fantastic. One of the things that hit me is actually with your 4 pillars, we probably could do another session on health, actually, because I think we've got a lot of overlap there. I think it's really interesting, but it about how on earth somebody gets into that position. So what are the unique challenges that your clients face, you know, to get them into a stage where they should really be questioning their relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, it's a great question, because some people, they often start off the conversation with me and they say, "Hey Keith, I'll tell you, I'm not an alcoholic, but," and I usually kind of make them pause and say, I'm not I don't use the word alcoholic. I don't think it's a helpful term. The definition of it's unhelpful. I think it causes so much baggage. I often say, look, is alcohol causing a problem in your life? Is it something that's kind of limiting you in any way? Is it impacting on your health, in your relationships? And most people can kind of go, actually, yes, yes, and yes. Okay, so we've identified that it's a problem. Maybe it'd be a better statement to say that you're a problematic drinker. Okay, so we've agreed that we're at the starting point, and that's kind of where we're at. Often then these people are really, really going well. Everything or lots of elements of their life are going well, but they realize if they can just get a hold of alcohol and maybe just push it to the side, and I want them to just to have that 60 or 90-day break, and then they see all the amazing parts to it, because you don't know what you don't know, Alli. So you don't know what it's like to have really good sleep. You don't know what it's like to actually bring all your anxiety levels down, to not have this kind of cyclical feeling of feeling hungover, feeling tired, then feeling good at the middle of the week, and then doing it all again. So we've got to have that initial break. That's what I always push for. What happens with a lot of people, they go through this phase, the 60 to 90-day phase, and they think, oh my God, this has just been unbelievable. This has been a game changer. I want to continue it. I want to extend it. I might do another 3 months. I might get 6 months. So that's kind of the plan of action. Do you know something that I was thinking during this phase where this starts to happen? I often think that the relationships, I often talk about scheduling some time, and making some time as a couple. And I talk about like scheduling maybe a date night or a session or doing that. Where do you think that ties in, Alli, for relationships and actually making time for each other and, like making it exciting, I suppose?
Yeah, I think there is that. I think there's two sides to it. So it's like, I think, well, suppose in many ways, the woman has to appreciate exactly what's going on. So, certainly with what you were saying about that individualized approach, I think where coaching is really exciting is the fact that you can work with somebody. So I would work with somebody and help them appreciate what are your goals. So that becomes the focus where we're trying to get to. I'll explain all the endocrinology so that they understand what's going on with them. And then I'll work through a whole load of different areas in their life so that they can actually make those small steps, create those healthy habits, and they're working towards their goals. So from that point of view, it is good to have that individualized. But now, of course, that's an investment of time. And I think as much as we would probably say to people, if you want to reach your goals, you've got this huge obstacle, we can help with that. But you need to invest some time and, of course, pay for the services. The same with your relationship. I think sometimes some couples, they can end up in a little bit of a rut that, they've run around after children. If they have children, they've been running around after their work schedules. They might have after work schedules. There might be a social life. As much as they want to prioritize something really important to them, like going out and playing, a game of tennis or whatever it may be, whatever they're putting into the schedule, scheduling that time and ensuring that time is free from distractions. So I had a lovely quote that I use from a lady who, when her and the husband were speaking, so the husband was saying, we never have sex anymore. And she said, how do you expect me to want to have sex when the dishwasher needs emptying? That is so classic. So that's what I mean by taking away from the distractions, creating some time. Now, what can happen there is when you book that time in, you can anticipate, which is quite exciting. You can start a little bit flirty with your partner, and enjoy looking forward to that time together. And if that time is actually protected, then it is much more likely to be a time where you have that communication, you have that intimacy, whatever shape that may take. And you actually have, as you mentioned earlier, that falling in love all over again. That whole connection is so important. But you can't do that when you're trying to juggle chores.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
you know,
so true. And I give the example. It doesn't have to, don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be a sit down meal in the best restaurant in town at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. It can be Tuesday at 10 a.m. because that works well for both of you, and you go for a walk in the woods. But you're
yeah,
creating time where,
yeah,
how is it going? Because I promise you, the conversation that needs to be had, it doesn't happen when the dishwasher needs emptying and the kids need to go to gymnastics club and you've got everything else to get to, and dinner's on. It doesn't happen. That's just like treading water. The real deep stuff where you want to, how are you? What's going on? What? Tell
yeah,
me about your life.
yeah,
The real stuff where people feel like they are listened to, because
yeah.
that's it, isn't it? When you feel listened, when you feel, oh, I'm in this together, this is a partnership, that's when you end up going and making love and having sex later on because that person feels loved.
And the interesting thing, the difference between the sort of male and female brain is really interesting. So for
Mm-hmm.
women, the main sex organ is the brain.
Right.
Okay, they don't tend to have that spontaneous libido. They have a
Yeah.
responsive libido. So they have to
Yeah.
be almost like encouraged, which
Yeah.
is that whole bit about it's not just time together, it's the wooing. It's a very
Yeah.
old-fashioned phrase,
Yeah.
but it's one I really quite like. Apart from anything else with a Scottish accent, it sounds a bit better, doesn't it? But it's really important to have that anticipation, because for the woman to start thinking, oh, I do feel a little bit sexy. Oh,
Yeah.
I really quite fancy that tonight.
Mm-hmm.
That is more likely to happen. So, you know, when I've mentioned this, you can see the chap's eyes light up as if to say, oh, well, if
Yeah.
I invest some time, we're more likely to have it on a Friday night, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. It's
Yeah.
not rocket
Yeah.
science.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. The guy needs to understand who, by doing these things, and it's not like I'm doing it, as we're doing it as a man to then get the end result. It actually all adds up, doesn't it, to a better household, a better relationship. Everyone's calmer, everyone's happier, everyone's on the same page. That's ultimately what we're talking around. But we know the end product is that actually you get a more intimate relationship and everyone feels closer.
absolutely. Well, this couple, he started emptying the dishwasher. He started doing a bit more
Yeah,
because his
yeah,
attitude was, that can wait till the morning.
yeah,
Her attitude was,
yeah,
I don't want to come down in the morning to
yeah,
empty the
yeah,
dishwasher. So,
yeah,
you know, it's that type of,
yeah.
that's where the communication. So once they both realized what the other needed
Mm,
and what was
yeah.
helpful, rather than it being, oh, they're making a fuss over nothing, it was actually that
Mm,
appreciation. Oh, my other half doesn't enjoy having lots of chores to do. You know, she
mm,
wants to be able to relax, and the way of relaxing
mm.
is to not have that. So it's that way of working together, which comes to the
Yeah.
communication, and it does open up the question as well. I think as couples age, because unfortunately, it's not just menopause that happens. Men can have situations like erectile dysfunction. There can be a whole load of situations for them. I mean, andropause, as the testosterone declines, they might feel they're losing a lot of energy, a lot of strength. They've maybe got a young man in the household who seems to be able to do an awful lot more than they do. I could imagine it's quite a tough time. So it does have to be that communication. And of course, if a couple haven't had a good sex life, it's not going to suddenly miraculously appear. It might be a good time to say, is this what we want? What do we
Yeah.
replace it with? What is important to us? What does intimacy mean? And then seeking help if it's needed. You know, there's
Mhm.
lots of help out there. But certainly for
Just
sorry.
tell us what andropause is, Ali, because I maybe ashamedly, before I start speaking to you, I didn't know what andropause was, and I'm thinking that if I didn't know, maybe a lot of other guys didn't know. So give us the headlines around what andropause is, and in particular, because it's a real topic now around testosterone and men either looking for testosterone, supplements or enhancing aids. So maybe just give us that link as well between andropause and also the kind of the decrease in testosterone for men.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, probably a best way to describe it is to look at it as being like a male menopause. So it's a gradual decline in testosterone levels. Okay, so there are a number of outward markers that would happen. You know, the sort of hair loss is one, and again, libido, energy, brain fog, all these types of things. But it's usually the energy. So and probably yeah, the cognitive function, just that sharpness that might not be quite there the way it was. So that tends to be the major.
And can that tie in with like physical shape? Because I know a lot of guys sometimes struggle. I've heard guys talk to me like, "Oh, I've got like man boobs, really. Like my body's changing." And often they've seen themselves go through this change from when they felt like they were maybe fit and healthy in their 30s, but then they're getting into their mid 40s, and they feel like they're maybe losing control of their bodies as well.
I think, well, it works quite differently between men and women. So when you start to get weight gain in women, it's because the body is desperately trying, you've got estrogen receptors all over the body. So the body's desperately trying to produce more estrogen. So what it does is it uses the fat cells. So that's why you tend to get that area around the middle. With men, I can't say it's an area that I've particularly looked into, but my understanding is it's a metabolism change. So if they're continuing to eat the same levels and maybe not increasing the exercise, then they've got to be sort of just that bit wary. I've always understood as well that if somebody was drinking a lot of alcohol, that's one of the effects that can happen, you know, big style. I mean, because alcohol does cause a lot of weight gain.
It hugely is. And you know what, Ali, there's so much empty calories, you know, that where your body can't actually do anything with them. The sugar levels, the amount of sugar in beer and wine, prosecco is through the roof. That's not just good for your own bloodstream, your internal organs, just even your sleep gets wrecked. So you know, I was working with someone this week, and he says, "Oh, my 2 glasses of wine that I was having in the evening," and he thought it was kind of moderate for him. He looks back now and realizes, wow, that was a lot. I was drinking it was literally a bottle of wine. But you know, if you stage that over 2.5 hours, 2 glasses of wine, that's where he was. He realizes now the huge. So by changing just this one thing in his life, he's lost, I think, about 6 kg in 6 weeks, about 50 days. He's looking better, his skin is better, he's sleeping better, he's able to just get up in the morning, he walks his dogs at 5:30, he's loving it, he's got a new regime. He couldn't do that when alcohol was in his system. So yeah, it ties in so much with kind of that link between your mind, your body, and how you feel.
Absolutely. And I think what people might not realize is as you age, the enzyme that breaks down the alcohol in the liver, it also decreases considerably in women, not quite as badly in men. It's called alcohol dehydrogenase. So that means the alcohol is sat there, not really, it's just causing a lot of damage as opposed to being processed. But what hit me is it's interesting how we seem to find it acceptable, even though we know the information that it takes an hour roughly to digest a unit of alcohol, and that will lessen as you age, and particularly with women. Then it means that you should be spacing out any drinking that is going on, because how do you expect your body to function? And when you're a woman going through this hormone fluctuation, you can have situations where if she's had too many units in an evening, the sleep will be impacted. The night sweats and the hot flashes just go through the roof. Sleep's so poor, wakes up in the morning, quite often headache, brain fog, assuming there's no hangover, and then starting to try and function during the day. You know, not functioning particularly well, stress hormones increasing, so then increased cortisol, which is really bad at sort of encouraging good deep sleep. So you just end up in this vicious cycle. So as you've had that bad day, I can imagine people thinking, oh well, I better have that glass of wine. And of course it keeps going. What it's not doing is creating that healthy body. I mean, one of the first health sessions I do with any woman is I look at their hydration. And I ask them to examine their hydration. Now,
Yeah.
Some embrace it, saying, I think this is what I needed to know, and yet I'm willing to give it a go because I really want to improve my health. I am struggling with flashes and things, so I do want to have that help. But for some, they really resist. You know, they're not interested.
Why do you think that is, Ali?
I think it's habit, and I think it's society encouraging. You know, their friendship groups rely on alcohol. They might do some social activity, and it's having a drink afterwards. In fact, even with couples, quite often they think that evening sat watching a TV program, but they've, you know, opened this bottle of wine and maybe another. You know, it becomes that habit. If he's drinking, it's more encouraging for her to drink because that's part of their time together.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of couples that actually reduce their alcohol when one makes that decision and one makes the step up. They often realize it was me that was the encourager. It was me that was the instigator. I was the one buying it. I was the one ordering it, and I was the one opening it. And then the other relationship kind of was just going along. And let's say in this case, it was the man that was initiating the drinking. The woman, she'll happily maybe not drink Monday to Friday. It was actually just because he was pushing it, and that's only sometimes they notice that when they step back from it and they stop their drinking. So it's quite interesting. Ali, so if we were to try and give an overview of this, and we're thinking about the people that you work with and I work with, and essentially we have people that they might notice that there's some fractions in their relationships, and often this gets worse, and then sometimes it breaks. And look, people do break up, and people will either separate or get divorced. We're not saying that won't happen or cannot happen, but actually there's some real things we can do and in relationships, and it can actually prevent it, and it can actually kind of really heal the marriage or heal that relationship. What would you say to that if you know if people are going through a tricky time now and it was linked to this, what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it has to come down to that open and honest communication. So, for example, one of the horrible symptoms of menopause can be vaginal atrophy. So everything just feels less, it's less pliable and elastic. So the skin changes, everything changes inside. So sex can actually become uncomfortable and painful even. But that can be something that the woman doesn't want to talk about. So it's actually making sure there is that honesty, because I can't imagine any man would be happy with his partner not being comfortable or even being in pain. And there is help out there. So I think the first one is that open, honest communication about wants and needs as well as anything else. I think it's finding that commonality within the relationship. So whether it may be something that's faith-based, whether it's maybe an activity, whatever it may be, is as you mentioned earlier, that whole, you know, why did you fall in love with the person in the first place? And it's that time, even if it's moved on, your relationship can evolve. You know, your relationship, I mean, I've been married 33 years. My relationships now is not the same as it was when we first got married. I would say actually it's probably better in many ways. But you know, we've been through a lot. But we've had well, faith's been our common bond. I think that whole piece about prioritizing time is really essential. And if, you know, most people that I've worked with, that's been something that's fallen through the net because there's not been the time, because simple things like by the time they've finished work, finished chores, they've collapsed into bed, and they've just given time to even say hello, even people that work at home. And in prioritizing time, it's also looking when you need to seek help. And it doesn't necessarily need to be couples therapy. I mean, it could be, you know, looking at coaching from people like us. You know, it could be looking at what is the specific issue. But I mean, I do some work with ladies, and I help them sort of support them in advocating for going for medical support if that is necessary. If you want HRT, you want to monitor the levels. So yeah, I think it's the communication, commonality, and then just that prioritizing time.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? It's so true. And I think doing the work on yourself first before you bring in all of your kind of baggage and all of your own issues into the relationship, because then often you think this is a relationship issue, and actually it might be you. And this is where I often ask the guys, have a real honest and frank look at themselves, sort your own shit out, and then we'll sort the relationship out. But actually you might be surprised, you might be able to get a lot of this true. You mentioned you are 33 years married. That is fantastic, and I don't say that flippantly, because one of my biggest, I suppose, pillars myself is to, you know, I grew up in a household that was I don't want to say dysfunctional, but it was a broken marriage, and my parents separated, and I know the impact that can have on the children as well as also but yeah, I suppose mostly the children. So when you say 33 years married, I think that's awesome. It's something that I'd like to emulate, and I don't mean emulate just for the sake of it, but I know what that means. That means you guys must have done a lot of work. You must have done you know, you won't have been insulated from the trials and tribulations. For someone who is who might be listening to this, who, you know, would like to say, geez, that's an amazing achievement, give us some headlines. How do you stay married? How do you stay happily married for 33 years? Have you got any top tips for me, Alli?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think it's that commonality. It's having that purpose and that focus in your relationship, knowing why you are together with the person. So you know, for us, it's definitely faith. I think when you go through tough times, it's making sure that you are keeping that communication going. So one of the things that really impacted on me was when I was going through cancer treatment, for my husband to turn around when we were with the oncologist, and we just had a few moments together, and he just turned to me and he said, health is all that's important. What he was basically saying to me was, it doesn't matter what's going to happen, we are going to stay together. And that just gave me such strength to get through. So I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to have to go through treatment, which I'm not really happy about going through, but it's true. Health is all that's important. So I think it's having that time, making sure you affirm, and it's also being interested. I find if I have a few days where I haven't asked my better half, I'll call him that, you know, what's going on in his day, how things are going, I see a difference actually. So I've got to sort of say to myself, doesn't matter what my day is like, I need to make sure, are you okay? And having that time. So if that's 3, I would say that's what's worked for me. But I think, do you know, I think it's good to sort of have a good time of laughing together. You know, making sure that you have fun together, and you know, because when you've been together a long time, and you can't help the chores, you can't help the responsibilities, but you can make a choice as to how you react to maybe challenges in time. And I think just having that time where you do have a good laugh.
Yeah, I love it. Communication keeps coming back again and again. I hear that so much. I suppose when the communication stops, that's probably a big red flag in a relationship, and they could go on for years in this cycle, but not actually communicating. So I like that. I really do think that's something that I would agree with and push towards and advocate.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Do you know though, Keith, I was just thinking, it'd be really good to sort of hear some success stories, because, you know, with a lot of what you're saying, I think one of the things that hit me was, you know, I hope anybody listening doesn't think that, you know, oh gosh, you know, a man's not coping with life, so he's sort of heading towards having too much to drink, and that's impacting in such a negative way in his life. But there must be some really good success stories. I mean, you mentioned about sort of the skin and the energy, but you know, with regard to relationships, have you noticed anything?
Yeah. So various scales will get different kind of uplift in how people feel and look and their energy. And I work with people that, for them to go out and run 5K in the mornings will be an amazing achievement, and other guys are running marathons. It's like there's a whole scale there, but the one kind of common thing is the uplift in the relationships, and that's the real, the stuff that knits it all together, that makes it all worthwhile. Because this, when you're feeling better physically and looking better, that's really like your kind of, the man experiences that. But actually, when the relationship gets elevated, then everyone kind of can have a piece of that. So there was one very recently when one of the guys, he played me back a voicemail that his wife had sent him, and essentially she said, "You've now become the guy that I had hoped I'd married 8 years ago." So they were married 8 years, and in the time that he was working with us, about 90 days, and then he extended it. He was now the man that she knew was there, but he just had drifted so far away from it. And he knew this himself. He drifted so far away from it with his essentially drinking, with his drug taking, that he wasn't that man anymore. And if that had continued, Ali, the marriage would have ended. He wouldn't have been with his children anymore. So for him to be able to turn that around, such a beautiful thing, because she knew she loved him. But if he continued in that vein, it probably wasn't going to work. So for him then to identify it, to work out his own stuff, and then they're stronger than ever. That's such a lovely thing. When I love being part of that.
And I think when you've come through that time of challenge, that's what happens. Strength. I always sort of love the analogy with muscles. You want to build up a muscle, you have to break it down, and then it builds back stronger. That whole thinking, which is lovely. I think what's been really good about our conversation is hopefully people will take quite a lot of hope from it, because there is help out there and support. So even if somebody is feeling, a lot of women with menopause, they might not understand what's going on, or they might be very frustrated. They might have been seeking help and it's not really working. They don't know where to turn, but there is a lot of help and support out there, which is good. And I think with men as well, and with relationships, there is that way forward for people, which I think is very optimistic, really.
100%. On that note, Ali, if someone wants to get in touch with you, if someone likes to hear, how do they get to have a conversation with you, and what sort of support can you offer them, Ali?
Yeah, well, probably the easiest way is to email me. So it's Ali with 2 L's at menomorphose.co.uk. So that's Ali at menomorphose.co.uk. And just let me know that you would like I do free hour consultations. That can be for individuals and for couples. And that said, I do work with those that are transgender and non-binary. And I'm happy to work with men going through cancer treatment, because they all, if there's hormones involved, then they will have menopausal symptoms. So that is the best way. And the help and support couples going through relationship issues, I would focus on understanding what is going on from a menopause point of view. If there was something particular with the man, or with both of them, I would definitely signpost to somebody that's maybe got the expertise I don't. But certainly when it comes to hormones and communication, I can help.
I like that. And we'll attach your email, and they can also send you a message, I imagine, on LinkedIn, if they're seeing this on LinkedIn as
definitely. Well. And the other thing is, I've got a free Facebook community group called Menomorphose with Ali. So if anyone wants to join that, they can. And it's a safe space, supportive space to ask questions and to get some information.
Magic. Okay. Is there anything else, Ali, then that you'd like to share? Or?
I think that's it. Just if anybody would like to reach out, if I can help in any way, I'd be very happy. I've got quite a range of different things I offer: one-to-one coaching, and I can do group coaching as well as corporate packages. So whatever suits.
Lovely.
But thanks, Keith. This has been really good. I've certainly learned a lot.
Brilliant. Alli Noel, thank you so much. Let me press pause on mine.